Welcome back to another exciting video of Lights Out Cinema. Today I'm going to explain a 2017 American science fiction horror film called Life. Life doesn't break any new ground in terms of plot, but a decent cast, phenomenal score, good direction and a cracker of an ending make it an enjoyable movie. It did get me thinking, who would win in a fight between Calvin and the Xenomorph? In near future, a group of international scientists was sent from Earth to explore unknown Mars at International Space Station. They got a sample of soil from Mars, which contained a sleeping alien cell. After a series of attempts, they woke up such cell and it was growing bigger day by day. During an experiment, the living thing attacked scientists and escaped from the highly sealed laboratory through an internal air vent. Those horrified scientists, on the one side they needed to protect themselves from being killed by this deadly creature. On the other side, they needed to terminate it before it was too late. However, this smart alien would do anything to survive. So let's dive into the story. But before we start, don't forget to hit the like button and also subscribe to our channel to get an update on our upcoming videos. The film opens in outer space where a capsule is floating amidst a meteor storm. 6 members of the ISS International Space Station crew captures evidence of life in a soil sample while returning from Mars. The crew of the Pilgrim 7 attempt to get the capsule as it contains a sample from Mars. Engineer Rory Adams steps out and tries to catch the capsule with the ship's mechanism. The capsule slams into the mechanism, but it's been successfully caught. Biologist Hugh Derry, an exobiologist who is paralyzed from the waist, studies the sample they recovered. It appears as an amoeba but slowly starts to grow its own limbs and even begins moving. The crew becomes elated when Hugh confirms that the specimen is alive. On Earth, people around the world are following the crew's mission and the prospect of discovery of new life beyond Earth. Children from elementary schools around New York are gathered in Times Square as they send messages and questions live to the crew. One girl goes up to tell the crew that her school has decided to name the organism Calvin. Among the other crew members on the International Space Station are Dr. David Jordan, Captain Miranda North, Commander Ekaterina Katgolovkina, and pilot Sho Murakami. They all bond over their mission and personal lives, such as Sho's wife having their baby daughter back on Earth. As they continue to study Calvin, they learn that it possesses muscles, vision, and a brain. A piece of equipment in the lab malfunctions, causing Calvin to go still and silent. After the equipment is fixed up, Hugh goes in and tries to revive Calvin with an electroshock wand. After a little jolt, Calvin wakes up and wraps himself around Hugh's right hand. He starts to grow in size and starts attaching himself to the glass plates. He grabs the wand and breaks it as he continues to tighten himself around Hugh's hand. Calvin then breaks Hugh's hand and causes him to pass out. Calvin grabs the broken wand and uses it to break through the glove in its containment cube. He then makes its way into a cage with the crew's lab rat. The rat makes a move on Calvin, so he wraps himself around the rat and consumes it, growing even more. Rory steps in to get Hugh out, but as he does so, Calvin wraps himself around Rory's leg, forcing David to close the door on Rory. Rory gets Calvin off his leg with an oxygen candle and tries to burn him with an incinerator, but he runs out of fuel. Calvin moves fast and crawls into Rory's mouth. He slowly kills him from the inside until Rory is no longer moving. Calvin crawls out and is even bigger as he escapes through a vent. The crew wraps Rory's body in gold foil. Hugh states that the lack of oxygen on Mars is what probably kept something like Calvin dormant for so long, and he suggests that it could be responsible for wiping out life on Mars. The crew then tries to make contact with Earth, but their systems have been disrupted. Kat puts on an EVA suit to step outside the station to fix the problem. Unfortunately, Calvin is outside and starts to wrap himself around Kat's suit. Kat starts to make her way back to the station, but Calvin cuts into her coolant system, causing her helmet to fill up with toxic fluids. David tries to get Kat back inside as she is drowning, but Kat intentionally leaves herself outside to prevent Calvin from getting back inside. Kat dies and her body floats out into space while Calvin tries to find a way back inside. The remaining crew members are moving into a decaying orbit, and they need the rest of their fuel to get back into a proper orbit, even if it means letting Calvin back inside the station. The crew plans to deprive Calvin of oxygen by sealing themselves in their hibernation pods and venting the oxygen out of there. Hugh starts to go into cardiac arrest, so they bring the oxygen back, only to discover moments later that Calvin is latched onto Hugh's leg and is now bigger, with tentacles and something resembling a face. After he kills Hugh, the other three hide. Shaw gets into his hibernation pod, which Calvin starts to break through. Because Calvin swallowed a tracker from Hugh's suit, David and Miranda are able to keep their eyes on his movements. They try to lure Calvin away with Hugh's body. Soon, they find that Earth Control has sent a Soyuz capsule to get the crew back to Earth without bringing Calvin back. The station docks into the capsule, which gives Shaw a chance to get out of his pod. As he tries to enter the capsule, a breach occurs from the imperfect docking, resulting in an explosion. This causes Shaw to get sucked out of the station, with the station's oxygen levels dropping and their trajectory headed back toward the decaying orbit. David and Miranda start to resign to their fates. They know that an attempt to make it back into Earth's atmosphere could kill them, but Calvin could survive it. David then remembers 2 escape pods on the station that they can use. One would get back to Earth while the other must be manually overridden to send Calvin into deep space. The plan is to once again deprive Calvin of oxygen to lure him into the pods. David lures Calvin into his pod and Miranda enters hers. Miranda has a navigation failure and begins to go off course from Earth. It is her pod that begins to float into deep space, not David's. David tries to pilot his pod into deep space, but Calvin immobilizes him. David is unable to control the ship and it enters the Earth's orbit. One of the pods lands safely in Vietnam, on Earth in the ocean near a boat with 2 fishermen. They make their way to the pod and discover David stuck in some kind of goo. Meanwhile, Miranda is sent helplessly screaming into deep space. David struggles to tell the fishermen not to open the pod, but they do so. Then 2 more boats pull up. While the audience is made to think that Miranda is the one who enters Earth, we are shown that it is actually David's pod with Calvin. Surprisingly, David is alive and Calvin has spread out like a web over David. Why has Calvin kept David alive? Well, it could be because the re-entry drastically changed the atmospheric conditions in the pod, which may have caused Calvin to go dormant. Alternatively, Calvin plans to use David as bait to get out of the pod. Either way, the film ends with multiple boats coming to the pod to rescue David as he screams for them to not to. They manage to open the pod. The film ends. Earth is doomed unless there is a sequel. Life's ending is a real shocker and apes the downbeat tone of other sci-fi movies like The Thing. While the movie was a modest success, it's highly unlikely it will receive a sequel, so it's up to audiences to decide what happens once Calvin makes his way out of the pod. Life doesn't break any new ground in terms of plot, but a decent cast, phenomenal score, good direction and a cracker of an ending make it an enjoyable movie. It did get me thinking who would win in a fight between Calvin and the Xenomorph. We hope you enjoyed our today's video. If you did like this video, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with the latest and most interesting videos. Thank you for watching.